Hey guys, welcome back. I spent some time with the Mahindra Born EVs, the 6 and the 9. Let's just call them that, please. The full name XEV9e is a tongue twister and inconsistent across the brand, so just let's call it the 6 and the 9. Anyway, I must admit that I was thoroughly impressed with what our own Indian manufacturer has come out with. Both these cars look leaps ahead of what we have been making here till now, and the ride, especially with the 9, is very impressive. The suspension and handling are well engineered, and I love driving it. Fit and finishes really improved, and overall, I was impressed with the full package. But I'm not going to sell all my ICE cars overnight and join the EV cult, at least not yet. And that's what we will talk about in this podcast style video. I did receive a lot of queries on the Tripaccino community page. I will try to answer as many of your questions also during this podcast. I have been studying and following the EV life cycle for quite some time now, but I think the Mahindra twins have finally pulled the trigger for me to talk about it. First, these are really what I call design led crowd pullers, right? I mean, just because they are born EVs and the car maker has the flexibility to depart from the traditional three box design. See, because there's no engine now, so there's no hood, there's no bonnet in the front. So you can just chop everything that's not required, and you could end up with a shoebox like the MG Comet. But they didn't do that. They instead chose this stunning SUV coupe body style, which is very much in trend now. Let's talk about the body type first. I must admit that I used to love the BMW X6, the original SUV coupe. My academic background in aerodynamics screams at me that it's a futile exercise in shaping the rear of what is exactly a jacked up bluff body, but it looked killer, guys. With the wide rear stance and beefy rear tires, one of my friends had an X6, it in black color. It was the first gen version around 2008 2010 circa, if I remember right, and it was drool worthy. This was the OG BMW with the sensible grills, not the abomination white teeth grill that they are passing off now. But these SUV coupes never really caught wind in the market and didn't get much traction. It was expensive and really internal space was compromised. It was inefficient space packaging to say the least. So we actually didn't see many of this body style. Volkswagen dabbled around with the Tiguan X and Renault with its Arcana. Luxury brands did the Urus and stuff like that, but I don't remember seeing much of it all these years until mass market Tata Curve and the Citroën Basalt brought them back. And Mahindra's Born EVs also follow the SUV coupe route, and I'm sure we will see more examples of this body style in the years to come. Beyond the novelty and the looks, the jacked up stance of the coupe makes it easy to lay out the skateboard battery packs on the floor. And that's why SUV coupes lend themselves well to this new EV hype. If you've heard about Gartner's hype cycle, most of the new hyped up technology will go through this hype cycle and die slowly. Only few will survive. While EV tech will probably live to see many more brighter days, the SUV coupe body style will ride the hype cycle and die eventually, according to me, my personal opinion. Once the novelty wears out, people will realize it is impractical, especially at the rear bench, and the headroom is non existent, and they will die their natural death. Just my prediction, maybe I'm wrong. Now let's come back to the Mahindra twins. The design is fresh, a bit over the top for my personal liking, but definitely eyeball grabbing material. You can't ignore these on the road. And they have distinct personas of their own, the 6 and the 9. Kudos to the made design team for cracking that right. The 6 is smaller, funky, and driver centric inside out, while the 9 is more the family pleaser. I would pick the 9 between the two, maybe because of the demographic, but also because I find it mechanically more sorted and relatively as a more value for money package. Because they are EVs, they are bottom heavy, but the dynamics and handling masks the weight so well, and the top points to Mahindra engineers for achieving this. This is again why the coupe body style lends itself well, because the way it distributes weight on the front and rear axles also helps in better handling than equivalent pure boxy SUVs. Let us speak of my thoughts about EVs generally. Thought number one: EVs are not new. They have been experimented ever since the 1800s, and attaching electric motors to drive wagon wheels with leather belts has been tried 200 years ago. But they never caught traction in the market against ICE vehicles because of the simple fill it, shut it, forget it peace of mind that ICE offers made it easy to adopt it as a mass market option. And that advantage still persists today in favor of ICE. Because over the years, the support infrastructure has grown up along with ICE cars so much. Petrol bunks, distribution networks is all set up already. Now, EV charging range anxiety is still a real challenge. No matter what we tell ourselves, 1 rupee per kilometer and all that, low running cost, etc., the infrastructure is still some time away for full fledged EV adoption. This will take time, and I would still not write off ICE in this decade at least, like most of these auto pundits will make you believe. ICE is here to stay, at least for now. Yes, regulations and government rules will push it top down. We will see some changes, but the sheer momentum that this mammoth ICE environment has built up over the last 100 years will take time to give in to the EV counterparts. Then, how will the transition from ICE to EV look like? What about hybrids? What about hydrogen? Many of you had these questions, so let me try to answer these. First, the ultimate aim for departure from ICE is to reduce the carbon footprint of transportation. Now, this can be done in several ways. BS6, 6.2, CAFE norms, and all such regulations, which make the ICE engine burn cleaner, is one way. But there's a technical limit to this beyond which there would be no significant reduction in carbon footprint. Also, diesels are having their own battle to fight because they need TPF, DEF, SCR to meet these norms. And diesel owners across bands have their own battles to fight because of issues with these complicated systems coming from clogging and replacement issues, etc. If we hit a wall with the engines, the other option is to instead play around with what we put into it, the fuel, which can be made cleaner. So, ethanol blends are being progressed now, and the government is also pushing it. If you track ethanol and sugar company stock prices, you'll understand that there is some traction in this direction. But with combustion, even with the best engine and the cleanest fuel, we will still not cut it. So, at some point, for the sake of the environment and for the regulations, and for ultimately moving towards the goal of reduced carbon footprint, we have to move away from ICE. But it won't happen overnight. It still will take some time to transition, as I explained. Okay, if we have to move away from ICE eventually, then what would do we move into? That choice happens to be EVs because of all the advantages and logical arguments we will discuss throughout this podcast. And do we move into EVs overnight and jump in? Not possible, right? Again, for the reasons we discussed. So, do we transition using some intermediate option like hybrids, or alternatively pull away tangentially to some other definite alternative like hydrogen? Let's break down this one by one. So, many want to push for hybrids, right? Because we want the best of both worlds. What's a hybrid? It's simply a nice car which has an engine, gearbox, everything normally. But you go ahead and plonk an small electric motor inside it and tell it to take over from the engine. So hybrid is kind of ICE plus EV. On paper, it looks like the perfect solution, right? You can use the motor without emissions, run out of range, no problem. Shift back to ICE, fuel will burn, and you can continue to drive without range anxiety. Quick acceleration, torque, all that, the motor will serve you in dollops. Low impact, steady cruising, you need that, switch to engine. All looks perfect, right? Well, here's the breakdown of the problem. For any of these options to really work, it needs to win a three-way race. One side of the race is the government pushing things, the other side is the manufacturer trying to push his own things, and the third side is the customer pulling with their own purchasing demands. What does the government want? It wants maximum reduction in carbon footprint, which means zero tailpipe emission, etc., as fast as possible. So, obviously, it will push for quick EV adoption, incentivizing car makers with a 5% GST against a more than 45% for hybrids. What do car makers want? If the eventual end game is EVs, then why should they pump critical resources and investments into another tech, a transitionary phase like hybrids? Why would they do it? Instead, why not pump in all guns towards the EV tech and work on refining that only? Because they also don't want to lose a head start to their other competition. This is a long race, mind you. It will take a lot of money and a lot of time and talent to refine and crack the EV sweet spot. So the earlier they start, the better. So anything else would be a distraction in their books, right? Okay. So hybrid fans would argue at this point, but it is just adding one motor to an existing ICE car. So how difficult is that going to be? Why don't they just do it? Well, it's not that simple. Adding a hybrid system to existing architecture is quite tricky. Space is really premium, and if they add an electric architecture parallel to the mechanicals, they're going to add complexity. And where will they shove it? Especially for small cars, there is literally no place under the hood already. Peep in and check for yourself. It's not that every ICE car can be retrofitted readily into a hybrid overnight. Mostly it's not possible. Even if it is possible, there are technical limitations, and if you cross that hurdle also, then do you, as a car maker, spend energy and time to do this, or rather jump into the EV bandwagon? Hybrid fanatics who are listening in will now, at this point of the podcast, say Toyota, but Toyota. Yes, firstly, I'm a fan of strong hybrids too, and I feel your pain of not seeing many options. But Toyota, I want you to look around and look at good, strong hybrids, okay? You will see that it's either a Toyota or a Suzuki. What is common? Japan, a small island which imports its energy from abroad. An island which had a Fukushima nuclear reactor accident, no fossil fuel reserves, and several other factors. So you see, their motivation to develop and excel at hybrids stems from those fundamental requirements of what works for them. It's fait accompli. And about hybrids, what no one ever talks about is the strain on the engine when you parallel it to an electric motor. Think of how frequent start stops that ICE engine will do. What is going to be the wear and tear at each start stop? What about the temperature fluctuations when the engine is running hot and suddenly stops and hands over to motor and then starts again? This in the long term will cause harm to the engine. And Toyota's engine may be able to take this beating because, well, it's born bulletproof, but normal car makers won't play this game. Because of all these reasons, we see only about, I think, 10 to 15 hybrids, but more than 40 EVs options available to the customer, who is our third stakeholder in this three-way race. What does the customer want? The customer wants to enjoy the subsidy, 5%, pick from the more variety options which is given to him, and wants the low running cost, and while doing all this, probably do their bit to save the environment also. That's why we see EV options going up and hybrids, not many takers for it. What about hydrogen? I was a big better off on hydrogen. I used to love it as a concept. I still do. But the problem is again handling hydrogen compressed gas cylinder, then there are space issues. How big a tank can you fit into the car? What range will a full tank of hydrogen give you? Definitely lesser than an oil burning fuel tank. So again, Toyota is trying something out with hydrogen, but I don't think that in cars we will push far in that direction because again, electricity distribution network is already there at every home. How do you get hydrogen to each house? Or will you put up hydrogen pumps in every road where people line up like CNG taxis? Rather more convenient to charge an EV at home, right? You see the logic now. So, my hypothesis, rather prediction for how this is going to play out going ahead, is we will start seeing ethanol blended cleaner fuels. Engines will go and hit a wall at some point with the more stringent emission norms coming in. And eventually, we will change over to EVs. But until then, a few strong hybrids will pop up here and there, and early adopters will enjoy what they prefer. Why I'm saying that some good hybrids will pop up is because EVs will still take a long time for complete adoption, right? The Mavericks, the excited folks, and the EV fans have already picked their EVs. So the first movers have already made their move. So that market is saturated. And globally also, we are now seeing that EV sales are stagnating. ICE fans and old school purists will wait out the storm until the end of the road. So who remain are the middle order fence sitters. So what will happen is stricter norms will breathe down ICE necks. Consumer pockets and the sentiments will sway towards the bridging option of good hybrids. Proof for this is in the sales numbers. I told you that we have far less options for hybrids than EVs today, right? In terms of model numbers, that's true. But see, the overall sales of these few hybrids have still beaten all the overall EV sales. There is an indicator that if good hybrids go mainstream, customers will get on that bridge. And for anything to go mainstream in our market, Maruti, which sells one out of two cars, has to do it. Again, there's a Japanese Suzuki badge on its nose. So through Suzuki, Maruti will bring some hybrids to the market, maybe series hybrids, where the engine runs efficiently like a power plant and only charges the battery. And then we will see the uptick in sustaining hybrids for the interim. Tata and Mahindra will continue to refine their EV game, and we will have many more options to choose for each zone in the years to come. Number two, EVs are zero emission, and hence ICE is the villain for all climate change. Well, yes and no. There are arguments valid on both sides, but we shouldn't fool ourselves that EVs are saints and ICE is the Satan. There is significant carbon footprint in mining lithium, manufacturing batteries, and then scrapping them. Again, we are yet to see that battery scrappage devil stare at us. Give it some time. We will have to fight that new monster. We will cross that bridge when we come there. But yes, heavy polluting industry, EV manufacturing, there's no doubt. And it needs electricity for running the cars, electricity made mostly by thermal plants by burning coal in India. So, in effect, you have simply shifted pollution from your city to some thermal plant somewhere else. But despite all this, over its lifetime, EVs do break even and eventually surpass equivalent ICE counterpart in environmental impact. That is a proven fact. We can't refute that. Also, lesser exhaust locally in our congested cities is always good. So there'll be lesser noise pollution overall if we start more seeing more EVs than ICE cars. If we stop the honking games, of course. But all this is all welcome and in my books support EV adoption. Thought number three, one of my favorite thoughts to debunk. EVs are more powerful than ICE, so they are more fun to drive. If you have been following my channel, I do include engine performance curves for the cars I review, and I explain why the engine behaves the way it does. Then we talk about the gearbox transmission and why it is required. Perhaps this is the only channel in the country which does this. Based on that, I'll explain the difference between typical EV and ICE performance. First, power and torque. We need to understand what they are. Simply put, torque is the capacity to do work, power is the rate at which work is done. There's a time component in power. If you bench press 100 kgs, that's your torque. How many reps, how fast you can do those reps in a minute is power. Torque translates to pulling traction, power translates to speed. We have seen this in our earlier videos. And if you've been following our channel, you also know that the numbers mentioned in the brochure of an ICE car simply show the torque and the power at the engine crank end. And eventually, the torque gets multiplied when it comes to the wheel, and the torque at the wheel is different from what is displayed in the brochure. This we have discussed in our earlier videos. In typical ICE engine, Fuel is burnt, it's combusted, it's exploded. This blast creates energy to turn the engine crank. As the RPM increases, slowly the power and torque will increase, as shown in the graph. Three things happen. First, notice that the peak torque and the peak power come later in the rev range and not at zero speed. Second, the peak torque and the peak power come at different points along the rev range. Third, on either side of the peak, the torque and the power taper off. So, to juice the max out of the engine, we need a transmission, a gearbox, to keep milking the engine within this sweet spot range to get the best performance out. In an EV, there's no engine, there's no combustion, there's only a battery connected to a motor that sits on the axle to turn the wheels. You switch on the motor and it will give its peak torque instantly. So, at zero speed of the vehicle, as soon as you start, you will get peak torque on tap. And that's the rush you feel when you drive EVs. Another confession: I was a naive purist in support of the I still I die school of thought until I drove my sister's Tesla Model 3 in the US. That torque on tap is addictive and very convenient. And as fun as those bumper cars in theme parks, you can have a lot of fun with EVs. Secondly, notice that this torque that the EV motor makes is flat, constant over a wide range. So you don't need a gearbox transmission to keep the pot boiling. So it's even more convenient. Thirdly, notice how after a particular speed, the torque tapers off. But when this happens, remember that the power here is constant. So since you have crossed the initial pulling traction requirement from the standstill and are already doing some speed, power which is required for high speed cruising is what's important in this range, and the battery serves it to you in oodles, and so everybody is happy. Remember that power and torque are related, as power is the product of speed and torque. So if you increase speed, torque will fall, but the power will remain constant. That's how it works. This is the mechanical reason why seemingly EVs feel more torquey and powerful than their ICE counterparts. Why I say seemingly? Because if I compare the same car, EV version versus ICE version, say BMW E40 versus the 440i, you will see that the power and torque are actually comparable but are served to you differently, as I explained above. And so EVs feel more punchy because they are punchy with the instant torque push that you get. If you want to make the EVs also milk the peak torque forever beyond the taper point, also, then you need to put a transmission. You can introduce a gearbox like what the Porsche did with the Taycan. They have put a two-speed gearbox there to make it more sporty and all, but I think it's pushing it too far. It's really not required. Thought number four: if EVs are so clean and so powerful and so convenient, why are all cars not electric? Well, the answer is simple. The amount of power that's hidden in one full tank of petrol in your car will require an equivalent lithium battery pack that's at least 12 times the size and at least 6 times the weight, roughly. This is called energy density. That is, how much energy can you pack into a given volume and weight. The energy density of the best battery available today is not anywhere close to what our trusted fuel tank can do. That's why EVs are heavier, because they need more battery packs, heavier batteries, and still range is limited, causing the notorious range anxiety for the drivers. Can this tech get better, and can the batteries get more energy dense and more efficient? Yes, they will, but not soon enough. And even when they do, they won't beat combustion because it is simple difference in the reaction. One is combustion to make energy, and the other is a chemical reaction. They will get better, but not anytime soon. Thought number five: the NVH is far more superior in EVs. True, the best example is the 6 and the 9 itself. It is eerily quiet inside the cabin, and since there is no engine, there's no rotatory shafts and none of the heavy noisemakers, you generally only hear tire noise in EVs. Even that has been taken care by using EV special tires with these twins, where they have done some foam filling which makes it super silent. I've told you in my earlier videos how NVH is very expensive to achieve from an engineering standpoint. You have to spend a lot of money to reduce even 1 decibel of cabin noise. The engineering in these cars, the Inglo platform, and altogether the inherent EV advantage puts these twins right up there. NVH very hard to beat with any ICE car. Period. Thought number 6, EVs are more efficient and maintenance free. Well, kind of true because there are lesser moving parts, no transmission loss, so no linkages in the drivetrain. Overall, yes, there is less wear and tear and less chance of mechanical failure. It is a simple black box. You switch on power, the battery drives the motor, which in turn turns the wheel. But this simple box is a black box, and that's a problem. Let me explain a fundamental difference between electrical and mechanical systems. This is not true only for cars, but for any system. In the mechanical system, the defect identification is quick. You bend down and you see what's broken. You will see a shaft broken, a link missing, or whatever. It's easy to localize the problem. Defect rectification, which is the second part, takes time. You will need to remove the wheels, jack the car up, remove the shaft, change it, etc. That takes time. In electrical system, on the contrary, it's all a black box. So the defect identification takes a lot of time. Just one fuse is blown for you to isolate that switch on, switch off, and localize which exact fuse is busted will take a lot of time. But once you've found it, defect rectification, the second part, swapping out the fuse, is very quick. This fundamental difference is to be understood between EVs and ICE. And now in modern day EV, these black boxes are very complex. And if something goes bust, this defect identification mostly cannot be done by you yourself without the service center assistance. It throws up some error code, something acts funny. You can't first aid it, is what I'm saying. Unlike a mechanical system where there's nothing you can't fix with bungee ropes and duct tapes. As the EVs get more and more complicated, more complex the systems get, and more opaque this black box becomes. That's my worry because even for the smallest glitch, the entire car can just get stranded and you are helpless. Which brings me to this obsession of big screens. This 9 has this huge screen, which is literally the entire dashboard. This is great to look at and futuristic feel and really stumps you once you get into the car the first time. But most of the physical buttons have gone into this. Now you need an orientation course to waddle through the zillion apps and layers to find something like, say, simple as ventilated seats. I was fiddling and trying to switch it off and eventually just gave up and let it blast through my backside because it got so distracting. Now, simple things are migrating onto screens purely for aesthetics, which is counterproductive in my opinion. God forbid the screen goes kaput for some small glitch. Then you're stuck. You can't access the simplest of features. This is also a safety aspect, and some regulations are already underway in EU to force some physical buttons, at least for basic things, to be provided in the dashboard in addition to screens. Which brings me to the next point about EVs and features. EVs lend themselves very well to advanced capabilities like drive by wire, etc., which helps in implementing ADAS 2 plus plus, for example. That's a good thing. But once you have the basic hardware set up for these in place, it's easy to slap on more features for the manufacturer. For example, like the 9 has the selfie camera, right? Which has computer vision. So it tracks your eyeballs, warns you if you're tired, if you're watching the phone, etc. What I want you to understand is once you have this camera in place, it's easy to make it do much more things for incrementally no cost. I could add a small water pump under it and have it squirt water at me whenever I feel sleepy. I can keep doing any number of gimmicks. Incrementally cheaper to just add features. And if there's anything we Indians love more than our sunroofs, it is a long laundry list of features. We would never use 90% of those features for anything more than bragging rights with our friends. But they are there because we force car makers to stuff as long a list of features as possible. Why do I have beef with this? Simply because our car models and variants are no more differentiated by mechanical and built differences. It's purely based on features. and which means you're forced to overpay for the top variant and get only simply easy to add cheap feature list in addition. The bottom variant is so bare bones, it's inhabitable and mostly a ghost model. No one has ever seen base variants of most of the cars on sale today. They exist simply on paper, and it is given as a sticker shock price for saying model starts at 9.99 lakhs starting price, and hook us into showrooms like lost fish, and then reel us up the variant food chain by baiting us with more features. A mature market will demand stronger fundamentals over feature list, and I really hope we get to that stage in at least a decade or two. And see, since EVs are basically electric motor driven, turning the wheels, I saw this boost feature button on the steering. It's great for quick overtakes. It punches out ahead for 10 seconds, like some NOS system from Fast and Furious. So I was excited the first time to switch it on. It's great, it's undeniably fun. But I want you to remember that it's just very easy to implement. Just playing around with the motor speed, just like a fan speed regulator at home. There's nothing great to it, easy to add, and easy to jack up the price for something which doesn't cost us much. Thought number 7: EVs are cheaper to own and maintain. Okay, initial cost is slightly higher, but the government rebate seriously close that gap. And if you have sorted your charging infrastructure at home, which mind you have to pay extra, then overall the running cost is less per kilometer. Yes, absolutely. Maintenance, lesser mechanicals, so yes, lesser consumables, fluids, oils, etc. Lesser number of filters overall, so yes, all things which add expense during an ICE service visit is far lesser in EVs, true. But the elephant in the room literally is the battery pack. In the Mahindra Twins, the battery is BYD blade cell, and today that's the best in the business, hands down. Still, all our battery is imported at huge cost from China and elsewhere. For example, a Nexon EV battery alone costs approximately 7 lakhs. Until we start mining our own lithium and manufacture our own batteries, this will remain the greatest barrier to achieve economies of scale and make EVs more affordable to Indians. Some lithium reserves have been discovered in Jammu and Kashmir, and let's hope we can capitalize on that sustainably. Next is the actual life of the battery itself. It is a chemical reactor and it has finite number of charge cycles, right? Charge discharge cycles. Just like your phone or laptop battery, after certain number of years or certain time of use, it will deteriorate in its health. Charging time will increase, charge hold capacity will decrease, so the range will reduce. Average across industry, most manufacturers are giving some kind of warranty average of about 8 years for the first buyer. Then there is a warranty is also about 8 years. Mahindra Twins with their lithium ion phosphate batteries are giving lifetime warranty for both the 79 kilowatt hour and the 59 kilowatt hour variants, which is good. But it's only for the first owner. The second owner gets some funny condition like 10 years or 2 lakh kilometers, whichever comes first, counted from the start of the registration date. So, though this is good, is this good enough from anxiety management of the second buyer? No, not really. Already there is inertia in adopting EVs for mainstream as the first purchase. Even after depreciation advantage, the second buyer might get it for cheap. But the residual battery life is a looming threat on the horizon for him, and it will take a lot of convincing to actually take the bait and bite the bullet. In the battery's defense, okay, the warranty is 8 years. It doesn't mean that your battery will conk off and die in the ninth year. It may live longer. But as a second hand buyer, are we willing to take that risk? Maybe not yet. Maybe not today. Rather buy an ICE or Toyota or a Maruti and live fuss free. I don't have anyone in my circle who has yet sold or bought an EV in the resale market because it's only been 4 5 years since we've started seeing EVs mainstream, right? So the life cycle has not gone so far ahead to get enough idea of what is happening. So we need to wait and watch, see how this goes into second hand market, and then that word of mouth for batteries performance beyond 8 to 10 years will spread, and then maybe we will see adoption. But until then, none of us can predict it. Not even the manufacturers are sure how this will play out. Else, they could have just given an unconditional warranty on the battery, right? They attach a condition for the second buyer and all that. So it is a wait and watch, and it is anybody's guess now. That's the truth. Thought number 8. Are our EVs world class? Okay, none of our Indian car makers make their own electronics or components. They don't have subsidiaries specifically working components for their own vehicles. So these are often the victims of cost cutting. Whatever is under the hood, away from visual range, is great for cost cutting opportunity because we like perceived quality. Our touch point should be soft, piano block should be there, we want leatherite stitching. But what's in the core of the car is often overlooked by us. We are all guilty of that. We are having cars at 20 lakhs budget, having all the features and then some more compared to 50 lakh cars. And we get swayed so easily, immediately by this. Now, because it's electronics, it's really easy to get a cheaper alternative component to get the same feature to you at a much lesser cost, just like as how I explained before. That we must understand clearly. That's why reliability of electronics gets affected. How many Scorpions, 700s, Harriers, any brand, any maker you see have seen electronic glitches? We have seen enough of these to know that the soft engineering side is still not matured to a level of reliability. This we should accept. So, more electronics, more the points of probable failure. Will these get ironed out eventually? Yes, eventually. But the first wave of early adopters will become involuntary beta testers. That's the simple truth. That's how this works. Because we are such a cutthroat, price sensitive market, manufacturer has no choice but to cut corners to keep costs down. So another vicious cycle starts, which I'm not justifying, but simply stating the fact, and there is no denying that. Then what has improved? Definitely platform superb, handling excellent for the weight, NVH cabin quality top notch. Mahindra's NVH is world class. These hard engineering, including the suspension and handling, is spot on. We have definitely come a long way and can fight internationally. But as an overall package, will I say it is a Tesla at a fraction of the price? That's what you'll going to start hearing people saying. It is a Tesla at one fifth the price, whatever. But it is still not there yet. Full disclosure, Tesla is the only global EV that I've driven, so my experience is limited to that, and my opinion is based on that. I would love to drive a Rivian truck and uh, bring to you something about that in the next opportunity. Let's hope that happens sometime in the future. Indian EVs, I have experience with quite a few of them, and in comparison, for the price point and the segment standards, the Mahindra twins do beat the competition, especially in terms of dynamics and NVH. Thought number 10. Should I buy an EV today? Simple answer. As a second car, yes. As the only car, no, not yet. Even if you have a home charger, etc., it will limit your commute to within the city limits. For highway runs, long distance excursions, it is still not seamless in terms of charging infrastructure. And each one has got their proprietary charging going on, a different app, a different plug. It is very, very non standardized yet, and it will take time. But we need to achieve a certain scale to standardize these things across the board and give fast charging available at all these points. So it will take time. The charging infrastructure is a video on its own, and if you are interested, mention it in the comment below, and we probably could take on that discussion separately. See, EVs is a chemical battery, right? If you go upslope on hills, the range will get reduced. Below 0 degrees temperature, significant reduction in battery performance. At minus 5 degrees Celsius example, you will shave 40% of the battery range immediately. Cold batteries will also take longer to charge and will also discharge faster. Simple chemistry, right? Above 35 degrees, which is most of India, most of the year, batteries typically lose 5 to 10% of the range against optimal advertised levels. Yes, now batteries are getting better. They're all weather and heat proof. Heat pumps are there, cooling fans are there, and they're all being integrated to keep it in its comfortable temperature. But again, now we are adding more and more parts to address a problem which we started in the first place. So it's again another vicious cycle. Battery tech will eventually get better, things will improve, but it's a waiting game again. Batteries are modular and sealed with an excellent IP, ingress protection. So, since no air breathing components are there, unlike ICE engines, EVs do manage rains and monsoons better. But again, some other sensitive component might bust out and your screen shuts off and you're stuck again. So, don't water wade through, though theoretically EVs will do better than ICE, but don't wade into water with EVs. Then there's this news about EVs catching fire in heat. Well, this is anecdotal, guys. I mean, ICE vehicles also catch fire, scooters catch fire, everything will catch fire. Only thing that when an EV catches fire, it makes viral news. So we see more reports of these. Park your vehicle in shade, EV or ICE. Don't leave anything flammable inside the car, because once you park it and all the windows are up, then the whole car is a greenhouse, right? And we know what happens inside a greenhouse. Temperature really shoots up and things can catch fire. Short circuits can happen with EVs, but they can happen in ICE also. So we have to be careful either way, and we shouldn't villainize EVs for this. They are much matured than just in spontaneously combusting. But if EVs get too hot or too cold, unlike engines, the HVAC system, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, is completely dependent on the battery power to heat or cool the cabin. That's going to reduce the range again, because a lot of battery power will be zapped for the climate control part. In ICE cars, the engine waste heat can be recirculated to heat the cabin. You can run separate systems for these kind of hotel loads, what we call, and isolate it from the car's actual moving duties. But in EV, the battery is the whole sole source. It's like a power station. So that's a disadvantage. For everything, you have to share the battery power. So, in summary, if you're looking for only a city commuter and not planning to do any long distance trips and need a nice urban runabout, then go for an EV. As a one car do all, EVs are still not there yet. Final thought number 10. You seem like an anti EV guy. Will Tripaccino ever buy an EV? So let me put you at ease and say that my next car will be an EV. I'm addicted to the press and go convenience of driving EVs. Yes, it is a disconnected driving feel. It is uneventful and feels very sterile as a driving experience. But the purist in me can keep screaming. But in cities, in traffic, there's enough stress already, guys, in our lives. So the uneventful drive to work is a welcome addition. And even when you catch a freeway and want to zoom, there's enough talk to push you back into the seat and have some fun. It does fly off the start, quite literally, and you can safely have some fun with that. But I would not take it interstate, neither would I take it for my off road excursions, nor will I replace, say, a fun sports car which makes an occasion out of driving with an EV. For those specialist tasks, I would still hang on to my ICE cars. EVs with a home charger within the city, good for pocket, good for environment, and great option as a second car. And that is why I would choose an EV as my next car. We already have an earlier video where I talk about having two cheaper cars instead of one expensive car and how that makes more sense. That's a counterintuitive thought to the common perception. And if you like something like that, check out that video. I will probably link it in the description. And let me know what are your thoughts about EVs and what are your questions or what are your anxieties about EVs in general going ahead. And if you like this podcast style videos, please do let me know in the comment below. And I would like to continue it about different topics, and we could discuss different topics with great technical depth. Thank you, and I will see you soon in the next video. Yes, I remember I promised you a Jimny video, and as all Tripaccino videos, it takes time to make it, so it will come out soon. Thank you. Bye bye, guys.